Welcome to Tartan Talk. I'm your host, Kristen Zosche, Dean of Student Life at Stuart Country Day School. On today's episode, I'm joined by Stuart Health and Wellness team members Samantha Ryan, Health and Leadership faculty, and Liz Semrod, school counselor. They have both been instrumental in developing the core Cordis curriculum and putting that mission into practice each and every day. Our conversation aligns with Stuart's new Core Cordis speaker series, designed to engage students and adults in meaningful dialogue and enhance their understanding of the interconnectedness of the mind, body, and spirit. And what better duo to discuss our first speaker and topic? So, welcome to the podcast, Samantha and Liz.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, very super excited.
We are sitting down today because of Dr. Rebecca Boswell's recent presentation on nutrition and body image in teenage girls. She covered key topics including the nutritional needs of teens and how to navigate discussions around body image. In your experience, what are some effective approaches for navigating these kinds of difficult conversations?
Okay, so I love this question in the sense that we are in such an instantaneously impulsive culture, and it's like this all or nothing thinking. And so when it comes to, I want to be 20 pounds lighter, I want to, be thinner, more fit, whatever, and asking like, what do you think is going to happen? Like if you were your perfect body, what might be different? And one of the things is I think my anxiety would be less. Maybe my depression would be less. It's more than just like disordered eating. It's about like it's control, it's anxiety, and looking at, we're always going to strive for something. We always want to strive for perfection, not attainable. And I think working with each other as women and girls about what that is. And, I love radical acceptance. Is it attainable? But just acceptance and just helping each other, if that makes any sense.
I think with our curriculum, we take a very holistic approach, thinking about, like, I know we're going to keep saying this again and again, but it is accurate, the whole mind, body, spirit concept, where it's not just about food, it's not just about nutrients, it's about how we feel, about how we are connecting with one another, because all of that, as we know, with any sort of topic that you're talking about regarding health and wellness, it's all collective, it's all together. So specifically with athletes, something that I talk about with our students, and a question I ask that works really well, because I remember as a kid, there was this one kid that was really good at soccer, and I was in middle school, and I remember classmates saying, oh, so-and-so's so good at soccer that during season she doesn't get her period. And I remember thinking like, oh.
It's like a rite of passage or something.
Right, like, oh, I get my period. Am I not a good athlete? And it wasn't until I was older that I learned that female athlete triad, right, not giving your body enough nutrients in order to actually sustain a healthy menstrual cycle actually is abnormal, right? And that's one of the stories that I always give, because I ask them, I said, how many of you have heard that myth? And almost all of them raise their hand. It's one of those concepts that kids really think that. So it's these offhanded comments that we hear. I think those are the ones that are difficult to try to combat in the classroom, because they really believe it, like people believe it, right? And so that's part of it. So that's one part, is like dealing with those urban legends, if you will, in the classroom. Another part is what we're hearing from family members and friends at home. Oh, like sometimes in the classroom I'll hear kids say, oh, well, my so-and-so is doing this like cleanse, or they're taking all these vitamins, or they're doing this whatever challenge. That can be difficult as well. So bringing the science into it, also bringing the social aspect of how they're being affected, also bringing in the aspect of like the psychological and emotional growth that they're experiencing throughout puberty. Dealing with all of that can be really challenging at times, but to really keep focusing on just some core aspects of health and wellness is really important. So fueling our bodies with what we need, fueling our minds with what we need, supporting each other, because ultimately all of that leads to optimal health. And I say optimal, I really try to say optimal a lot and not just health, because there are things that we can do to just survive and to sustain ourselves, but there are other things that we can do to live optimally. And that I think everyone's having the challenge with optimal.
That was well said. And you know more about this than I do, but like our gut health, right? And there's all these research and indications now, like what we put into our gut affects our dopamine and serotonin in our brain. So teaching and educating our kids, it's not just about our physical being, it's about how it can really, affect our space in our heads.
I want to return to a focus on the female athlete, because Sam, you mentioned athletes specifically. In a study of Division I NCAA athletes, over 1/3 of female athletes reported attitudes and symptoms placing them at risk for eating disorders. In another study among female high school athletes in athletic sports, 41.5% reported disordered eating. We know there are serious risks associated with relative energy deficiency in sport, from reduced performance and increased risk of injury to cognitive deficits and depression. How do we proactively handle this reality?
So I think a huge part of that is having these relationships and connecting and listening. So just, again, like those very casual conversations, what are you hearing people saying? Because I will very casually hear a student or even one of my kids tell me something that was said that isn't the healthiest thing to hear, right? There are so many studies that show that having ample nutrients increases performance. And so while people believe that, being lighter or being leaner, that for a kid and for an adult, right, that's incredibly confusing. So while all the studies show that athletes work optimally with better fuel, with better hydration, we're still hearing from so many people, adults, right, the complete opposite. So for a kid, and for adults, like I said, that's really hard.
In her talk, Dr. Boswell also spoke of the behavioral and psychological signs of disordered eating. How can we as educators be best prepared to support our students? What should we be looking out for, and what preventative steps can we take, and do you take in your work?
For me, as a teacher and a parent, I think the first thing that I have to remind myself is that this is hard. It's hard, and we're going to have some missteps. And I think as a parent and as someone who has daily conversations with the kids, I have to remind myself that it's okay to have like a day where you're feeling off. And I do my best to model that, but at the same time, I can get really worked up about making sure I model that. Like Liz and I have talked about this before, that sometimes we're so worked up with trying to do the right thing or like model the right thing, but that in itself is not modeling the right thing, right? It's okay to not be okay.
Well, and having these honest conversations with each other, and
right.
and being like, we don't know everything.
And you don't have to always look at yourself and be like, I am amazing. Like
right.
that's weird too, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think sometimes we have this message to the kids where you should love yourself and you should always love, like that's not realistic, right? So I think that whole social emotional part is really important. Then the other part is, again, trying to just be mindful of in that prepubescent state that they're going through before they hit puberty, before a girl even is able to have her menstrual period, she needs to have a certain percentage of body fat, right? For that right amount of hormones to kickstart in her body. And if that doesn't happen, there could be a delay of her first menarche, or first period rather. And so I think explaining that to kids, because at 9, 10, 11, you can hear them being like, oh, I have a little tummy, or you can you hear that, and they're comparing themselves to what they see on TV, what they're seeing with much older individuals.
Instagram, social media.
Oh
man.
my gosh! Ugh. So that's another aspect of it, right? Being mindful of social media, being mindful of hearing what I said that before, hearing what they're saying, but then just knowing a little bit about the science, I think can be so helpful. But just looking into the research and looking into the science and learning a little bit about the biology and the physiology behind it all can help explain your answers to your kids more. that they can wrap their heads around it, and it's not just like, oh, don't worry honey, that doesn't help, right? But sometimes when you have some good cold hard facts, that's helpful.
And so we should then talk about what the body can do and does versus what it looks like.
Right. 100%.
My only challenge is I love that, but I think the kids sometimes, like, the science doesn't propel them. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's so important, right? But I think it's still like so ingrained, like, but I still, I don't care. I'm not going to get my period. I don't care that I'm not going to, because I want to look this way right now. It's that impulsivity of like right now versus future based, and how we have that conversation, because that's hard. I mean, it's even hard for me at 52, let alone, a 12-year-old young woman.
And so what do we do, right? How do we combat all of those external forces that are, influencing how our students see themselves and the ways in which they move through the world?
My big hope for my students is, I know they're not always going to make the best decisions, right? And I mean with anything. So I don't just mean with nutrition or with health. But to know, for the bigger picture, ultimately, I hope that they can look at themselves in the mirror and on a daily basis be like, you know what? I'm a pretty good person. Like, are they going to have like an off day? Sure. Are they sometimes going to say some things that they wish they didn't say? Sure. Are they not going to score like the perfect grade on the test or like do the best they wanted in a game? Sure. But for the most part, can they look at themselves and can they say, I'm okay.
Right, because that can coexist. And I think that's, again, it's like this all or nothing, like we're either like all bad or all good, right? But that the two things can coexist. Right. Like, I had a bad grade. That doesn't mean I'm a failure. And working on that and be like, I can still love myself despite X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And that, having that conversation and continuing, all of us as adults, even, like, I love teaching with you because you're very open and aware, like, I totally messed it up, guys. Sorry. Let's reboot, right? And it gives that's what mirrors for them. It's like understanding that we also have flaws and make mistakes.
Now that you've brought it up, teaching together, that is, I want to ask you about that intersection between physical and mental health. How does the collaborative work you've been doing as part of the core Cordis curriculum and that class relate to what we've been talking about today? How are you supporting students, not just for the present, but for long-term sustainable health and wellness?
I think we're having a great time having Liz be part of the class and pushing in, having a counselor in the classroom has been so great because kids are, they're used to seeing her. So having these conversations with the counselor, it completely has dispelled this stigma of getting help. First, I think the kids get a kick out of our banter because
it's so good.
We have a lot of fun together. But also, I think they also see a camaraderie, and I think they also see how we help each other. So if I am at a loss for words, which is pretty often, I'll be like, Liz, help me out. But I think it's important for them to see that, two people can work really well together, and they might do things differently or they might say things differently, but the message is the same. I think that's cool. I think Liz is really good with bringing out that, well, how come, so I might bring a point across, or I might want to have an objective met, and I'll mention it. But Liz is so great with being like, okay, wait, hold on a second. So you just learned that, but like, what does that mean to you? Or how does that make you feel? Or how come? And that is, like, when we do that, it's a perfect example of
the collaboration,
bringing that whole mind, body, spirit together.
Right.
It's so important.
Yeah, I mean, it's great because you're so natural, by the way, and like easy. And I think our collaboration together and like the stigma of mental health and the stigma of counselors, like we're going to sit there and be like the old Freud and like just sit there and analyze you and be like, so tell me more, versus like, oh my gosh, like she's human, we're human, and it makes it more fun to talk about it and not saying to the kids, you have to tell me your deepest, darkest secrets. But like, hey, I'm here to support you, whatever that looks like. If you feel like you want to talk about, your math quiz or pasta, and you really help with that as well, and they feel so comfortable and confident coming to you. And then we show that together, and it like makes this like beautiful space for them.
I love her.
Yeah.
So I want to return to the mind-body-spirit connection, a concept our health and wellness team has discussed at length during the development of the new integrative wellness program. How do you both view that interconnection as it relates to leadership development for young women?
Oh, so I've been thinking about this because I had a really amazing professor. It was just a class I took just, for fun, actually. It was a developmental psych course. And it really changed me as an educator, as a person. So something that I always remember my professor saying is, before you can ask a kid, like, what's going on with your math test, or, why haven't you been doing your homework? It's so important to ask them how they're doing and like what's going on. Because the math test, the vocabulary, being able to focus in the classroom means nothing if they can barely hold it together as it is. And so understanding that everything is cumulative and everything is very layered, I think when we're dealing with students is so important. So who cares about the grade if they can barely get up in the morning
Or have a hot meal.
Yes.
Right. Or they're eating Cheetos for breakfast.
Right.
I mean, I'm all for, having junk food. So don't get me wrong, but there's a time and a place for it. And if we don't fuel our bodies
Right.
with good stuff, and we have lack of sleep, or we don't have food, that then like domino effects, like you're saying,
Right.
into, so looking like the layers like underneath of what's really happening at that core.
Thank you for driving home my point that wellness is foundational for leadership, but also just good for kids and their growth and development.
And I think communication, right? Like I'm sometimes not good at, like when I'm really grumpy and my kids come and I, get stressed out and I start cleaning because that's mine. I'm like, and no one helps around the house, versus like, what, right now I'm feeling really overwhelmed and I'm going to come across as maybe being more angry. I need a moment. And then that like gives me time to reflect and decompress before I, get reactionary. So I think also teaching that as a part of the leadership and the core Cordis of communicating like a feeling, which is so hard.
That communication part, especially with leadership, right? I really believe everyone is a leader. We may show it in different ways, but tapping into that, a huge part of that for any individual is 100% communication skills. Everyone has a different, I'll say, skill set when it comes to that, but learning to be more of a well-rounded communicator, I think, is important. And part of what we're doing in class, we're practicing those. So, and we've been given more time to do it, so we can spend more time, because it's not one of those things that can be done quickly. So Liz is so great with, like, using her background, helping the kids say, okay, well, what is going to be heard when you say that? Or what are your feelings? I think that's really important for them to be able to really think about, like, what's the end goal, right? Is it really accomplishing your goal of meeting your emotional and psychological needs, and also taking into consideration the needs of others? So we were talking about, Liz brought up a great idea of, we should talk about love languages, right? Because my idea of good communication might not be your idea of good communication. So we still have to think about both of those aspects with communicating, which is huge with leadership, right?
Yeah. With the love language, piggying back off of that, like mine is like quality time, right? But if yours is gift giving and you give me gifts because that's how you perceive love, I'm going to be like, what? Thank you, but I want the quality time. And so if we can communicate that to each other, so that I'm like, oh, she's actually showing me that she loves me because that's her language. So it kind of breaks that down.
It's about understanding and respecting the values of others, right? We all have different value sets, and we can hold on to those while still respecting the values of others, those who hold values that are different than our own.
Right. And that's a huge
Perfectly
part,
said. Yeah.
huge part of 8th grade core Cordis is we spend so much time on values,
Right.
and like building those values and understanding our values, because that is the framework for so much. And I know this might seem like, where we're going right now is kind of going off on a tangent from the whole nutrition aspect, but it's not. It's all connected.
Yes. And our values change over time, right? Like what I valued when I was 15 is different now.
Right.
And being open to that.
Right. And like even with, right, we bring science into it with puberty, just with the science of puberty, as we're going through puberty psychologically now, we are looking more where we didn't care when we were 8 or 9 to brush our hair. Now all of a sudden we do. And maybe at 8 or 9 we didn't care about what we looked like or smelled like. But when that's changing with puberty, with psychology, yeah, we do all of a sudden. So then now, yeah, we are watching those videos, right? And as a parent, you're like, why do they care all of a sudden? Why are they so into their looks? Why are they watching these videos? Because it's developmentally appropriate,
Right. And it changes.
And it changes, and we have to move and shake with the kids.
Yeah, I wish there was like a magic pill for teaching young women about their bodies and eating disorders, and it just saddens me that we're still in a culture of this is like what we have to look like, and asking ourselves, I keep saying this, I'm like a broken record, like what is the end game of that? There's no end game of perfection. It's just self-awareness, growth.
Oh, I love that. There's no end game of perfection. That's beautiful.
Thanks. Aw.
We should make a sticker out of that.
We should.
A Cordis sticker.
Yes.
The end game is not perfection.
And what a perfect way to end this podcast. Thank you both so much for being amazing and for being experts in your own right. We are so lucky to have you here at Stuart, and thanks for joining me today. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for
I don't want to end this conversation. It's so fun.
Stay tuned. Maybe we'll have another episode coming soon.
All right. Thank you.